Good morning, everyone. This is Rohan Bhondekar joining from Spain. You are watching 360-degree live show hosted by Transcontinental Times. The purpose of this show to bring people from different countries who are working on the ground. Those are part of social awareness, social activities, and social mission. Whereas we bring people from film industry, we bring people from aviation industry, then hospitality, then we have entrepreneurs, then we have IS, IPS officers, civil servants, international diplomats, and so many other industries. Whereas we bring people to share their journey, share their experience, and share their mission, what they're doing for. So today we have a very special guest who is joining us from Africa. He's actually Spanish and working with United Nations more than 21 years. And also serving his best implementation of work for the betterments of the society. So he's Amado Andrés, joining us from Senegal, Dakar. Right now, he's deployed and managing a role as a for UNODC department as a regional director, and helping Africa to prevent the crimes and also drug trafficking and all. So welcome, Amado, on Transcontinental Times. Thanks for joining with us.
Good morning to everybody. Good morning, colleagues. Big hug to everyone joining us today. You are in Madrid, but I'm in Dakar, in this beautiful city where everyone is active, starting at 5 o'clock in the morning, even on a Sunday morning. So welcome to everybody.
Thank you, Amado. And indeed, our pleasure to have the big person on our Transcontinental Times live channel. And whereas people are going to watch you and you're going to share your experience, with other colleagues as well. So coming back to the question, right? So when you started your journey almost 21 years ago for United Nations, and also you as the part of European Union, and then also you work with Samsung and many other big organizations earlier. Before starting with UNODC, what was your dream to support a society, and what was your main focus area which you thought before joining UNODC to improve? If you could elaborate from your experience perspective, it would be great.
I think that John Lennon used to say that life is what happens when we make plans. Normally, especially after COVID-19, we have learned that making plans is difficult, but dreaming big is important. Before I joined the UN, something that my father told me many years ago, back in the days when I was 21, I'm 50 years old right now, Rohan, is try to get started in the private sector. Why? Because something that I think the private sector has, and the UN is getting there, is working towards objectives. I started in Samsung back in the days in the division of IT and chemicals, and every day my director general would come up to me and say, please, Amado, let me know what your outcomes have been, the outputs of every single day. Whether you have met the targets, etc., etc. So I think that the UN, with the Sustainable Development Goals, and this is one of the reasons why I really like the UN, is a bottom-up approach. Bringing all the society together, not leaving anybody behind, and then working towards a common objective. This is one of the reasons why I really wanted to join the UN, but I wanted to start in the private sector. The UN has undergone a lot of changes, really a lot of changes, especially with the 2030 agenda. There are a number of processes that are taking place today. One of them is decentralization towards the hubs. You see that I'm not wearing a tie today. Why? Because, not only because it's Sunday, but because the UN is also about that. It's not only about going to important meetings when you help member states negotiate, but it's also being on the ground, getting your hands dirty, and living in the reality that you are trying to change, along with member states and civil society and the private sector. So the second reason why I wanted to join the UN, and you will be surprised by what I'm saying, for those of you who work in the private sector, or for those of you who work also in the public sector, the UN is the only organization in the world, the only one, where you are paid to learn every day. Every day, I always tell my colleagues, if you don't learn something today, there is a problem. Top managers, directors, senior managers like me, technical staff, team leaders, project managers, everyone learns everything they want to learn throughout the course of the week, throughout the course of the month. And this is one of the things that I think it's quite important for me to emphasize, especially right now when everything changes. The only thing that will not change is constant mutation. So that the UN allows you the possibility to really adapt and learn every day, get up to speed with different kinds of issues, And I give you an example. When I was I've been serving in Eastern Africa for 3.5 years, based in Nairobi. I just arrived, and so the Prime Minister of Mauritius wanted, us UNODC, the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, to support the country in the establishment of a financial technology hub. So I had to bring the private sector. I had to raise resources, and together with the government, with the Central Bank of Mauritius, with the Financial Service Commission, with the Economic Development Board, we produced during the course of 3.5 years, a financial technology platform called Pay by Dodo, along with an exchange that is now able to do crowdfunding operations. So, I had to do a lot of learning while being in Eastern Africa to understand how the private sector works with the UN, and of course with the UN Resident Coordinator's Office in Mauritius, how together the UN as a system, spearheaded by the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, could work with the private sector to bring the solution that the government of Mauritius, which is a knowledge economy in Africa, wanted us to do. So you need to learn all the time about new skills, also new skills that are being brought about by other UN agencies.
That's good to know, Andres, because what I see, the UN itself is a platform for people who wanted to do something new in the society, right? And it enables a platform for people who are having creative ideas to support society at a global level, right? So I believe in that, and UN is doing good work, and because of that, humanity is still there to support, and people like you are doing good work. But apart from that, you also work with European Union, right? And as a consultant, and based on that, you also seen so many diversities in a country level. So what is the difference between the European Union mission and what is the difference between the UN mission? That's if you could elaborate to understand for our audience, what is the difference in between the idea and the mindset when you work with both organizations together?
I mean, look, I'm Spanish, and Spain has traditionally been a very strongly supporter of the European Union. So the European Union is not it was treated back in the days when the Treaty of Maastricht in 1981 happened as an international organization. Now the legal entity of the European Union, is based in the treaties. The founding treaties, the Treaty of Maastricht, the Treaty of Amsterdam, the Treaty of Nice, etc. Now we have in the European Union, the difference is that there are different institutions that are really kind of almost federal. We have the European Central Bank in Frankfurt, which basically guides the economic policy of the European Union, and of course, it was the initiator of the euro. Which I think is a really good instrument of the European Union. But you also have the European Commission, which is kind of like the executive body of the EU, and then you have the European Parliament representing the peoples of all the 27 EU member states, and then you have the Council of Ministers, which basically represents different formations of ministers. For example, the Council of Ministers can meet in the formation of ECOFIN, all the finance ministers to discuss finance questions. And then you have the Troika. The presidency of the European Council has a rotating presidency every 6 months. So one country takes the turn every 6 months to guide, along with all the member states, the basic objectives of the European Union. So I was a consultant at the European Commission, which is like the executive body, and it was really interesting because here you have some 580 million people with the UK. Now the UK has gone out of the EU, trying to formulate policies in a coherent manner. I think is the best experiment that the European Union has successfully done after the Second World War. So I was part of that. And it was really an eye-opener because I spent 11 years in the United States, and I mean you guys know that the United States, again, is one of the strongest democracies in the world, and so is the European Union and member states like Spain. What I'm trying to say is that I came from like an extremely federalistic state, which is the United States of America, into the European Union, and then you saw an experiment that is working well in spite of all the crises, the 2004 to 2008 financial crisis, etc. We also went through the financial crisis of the 1997, 1998, etc. But it's working. Now, what is the difference? The UN is based on treaties, just like the EU. But the difference is that the UN is an international organization, is worldwide, and it has a number of mandates that tries to implement and is implementing on behalf of member states, supporting member states, depending on the mandate. Some of the agencies come from the Secretariat, like the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, and I'm the regional director for West and Central Africa, covering 22 countries. Some agencies cover, for example, the fight against terrorism, UNODC, which also UNODC does, based on the 19 universal instruments against terrorism. But then there are some kind of hardcore agencies, and they are agencies. They act as agencies like the International Atomic Energy Agency, which, by the way, as you probably know, won the Nobel Peace Prize some years ago. And then you have the UN development, the UN development program. You have a set of humanitarian agencies like UNODC, etc. So is global, as opposed to the EU, which is based on the European Union member states mandate, constitutions, etc. Even though the EU also has a global reach and is one of the most important partners for the UN, and especially for UNODC. I'm always very fond of now working in the UN, having I'm humbled to work with the European Union. Is I would say one of the most neutral actors, just like the UN, acting in any given region. Also providing funding and providing solutions for member states. So it's a key contributor. The difference is that we are extremely decentralized. I always say that we are not ambassadors like regional reps, regional directors like me. We are not ambassadors. We are prime, senior managers managing a team of very, very skilled people. While the European Union has its ambassadors to member states, and it's operating, as I said, based on the treaties. We are operating based on the mandate of the General Assembly, or, for example, in some cases, the UN can operate based on the given UN Security Council resolutions, etc.
That's nice to know your experience, and your execution of work tells, so much of the solid and potential impact of this for the society. Good to know about your contribution for European Union and UNODC, Amado. But apart from that, the crime rate across the world, right? If you let's talk about Africa, right? So as you are managing right now, West and Central Africa, whereas 22 countries are covering, right? So what are the crime and how UNODC is supporting to prevent the crimes? If you could give some pointers and roles of UNODC for preventing the crimes and what are the those kind of crimes? If it could be elaborate, it will be great.
You know, so let's rewind a little bit so our audience understands. You know, I started in UNODC some 18 years ago, almost 18 years ago. Before UNODC, I served in Kosovo with the UN mission, UN peacekeeping mission to Kosovo right after the Balkan Wars. And before that, I was with the World Bank in Manila, Philippines. Now, when I started here, you know, I was the deputy regional representative in this team, and I had the possibility of supporting some of the member states already to start becoming champions of some of the activities and initiatives we in UNODC support. Then I went to Vienna, heading the program development team in Latin America and the Caribbean. And from Vienna, I went to Panama. UNODC established a regional office for Central America and the Caribbean in Panama. Back in the days, I was humbled to really become the regional representative of that office when it was, you know, elevated to the rank of regional office, and the office has done extremely well. And then I was requested to serve in Eastern Africa, in Nairobi, as a regional representative of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime in Nairobi, covering all Eastern Africa, the Western Indian Ocean, and the Horn of Africa, where you have countries like Somalia, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Djibouti, and the Great Lakes countries like Uganda or Rwanda or Burundi. So a very interesting region. Now, in that region, we could already see that heroin trafficking was already becoming an issue. What we do, for example, in Eastern Africa, you have probably seen, and if you go to our website, you will see, we have, for example, a number of programs like the Global Maritime Crime Program, which identifies the gaps in member states together with member states and supports member states with solutions. Solutions comes from, first of all, establishing with member states maritime crime units, like the ones that have been established, for example, in Mombasa, but also in Mogadishu, in Somalia. And these maritime crime units are, you know, coordinating operations with member states, you know, doing hot pursuits and coordinating intelligence, feeding this intelligence back, for example, in Mogadishu to the intelligence, to the prosecution service, to the police force, etc. But that solution is at the beginning, is basically the law enforcement solution. Then we have to go deeper into the ample criminal justice chain. So, you know, UNODC also has supported, for example, the federal government of Somalia in the establishment of the Mogadishu Prison and Crime Complex, which is the first ever complex that integrates prosecutors, judges, you know, who have already started investigating piracy, maritime crimes, including Al-Shabaab. Then they go before the court, so the court is there. And once they are sentenced, if they are sentenced following a strict, you know, human rights standards and the criminal code and criminal procedure codes supported by UNODC, then if sentenced, they go into prison. And we have also supported the government of Somalia to implement the Nelson Mandela rules. We have also physically built, you know, high security prison modules for more than 250 detainees of Al-Shabaab in the same Mogadishu prison and crime complex. Now, what we are working in is into the reintegration, rehabilitation of these prisoners, so they can actually follow the entire criminal justice chain from the beginning to the end with, you know, in full compliance of human rights standards. I'll give you, that's an example of what we are also doing in West Africa. We are also doing something very interesting, which is dealing with innovation digitalization. In Kenya, I just arrived here. So, you know, we are trying to extrapolate some of the solutions that we have done with member states in East Africa to West Africa. In Kenya, the Chief Justice back in 2018 requested UNODC to start working on the digitalization of the entire criminal justice chain. We supported, for example, Kenya in the establishment of the National Council for the Administration of Justice. And you have in this National Council for the Administration of Justice a set of different partners. You have the police force, of course, you have the judiciary, the prosecution, and you have prisons, the prison service, etc. So we did a gap analysis, and now what we are doing is to, transform the entire system into, for example, what we have called the e-courts. Kenya is one of the first member states in Africa to start, instilling and establishing the e-courts. But also the digitalization will run across the criminal justice chain from the police. In a couple of years from now, hopefully, when you get a ticket violation and you are driving in Kenya, you will no longer go to jail. You will basically, of course, there will be accompanying measures to change the legislation, but you get a ticket in a couple of years from now, you will, you'll be before the, you will be discussing with the police agent. You will be able to pay directly the ticket with directly through what they have in M-Pesa, and everything will be done through an artificial intelligence solution like this one, which we have produced for with Mauritius, which is basically a payment device. So these are the kind of things that the UN Office on Drugs and Crime is doing in East Africa, and we are also doing them in West Africa. Now, it's very important to highlight that in order for UNODC to be successful, we need three things. We need champions. We need countries like Kenya. We need countries like Somalia. But we need countries like, or Mauritius. In this region, we need countries like Senegal, like Ghana, like Cabo Verde, like Gabon, countries that really, really, really become champions. So they push the agenda, and UNODC will support. Secondly, we need the full commitment and empowerment and ownership of every single member state. And the member states are the clients that we have. And thirdly, we need the private sector and the civil society to also embrace the same change and push in the same direction. And I make a specific note to the strength of the youth. UNODC has established a youth program in Eastern Africa. We are supporting member states to identify youth leaders from the private sector, from the parliaments, and of course from civil society and from the public sector, so that many of these initiatives that we are trying to adopt and support count with the special action and leadership of the youth population, the young population of West and Central Africa, a really interesting region.
Good to know, Amado. I think you have covered all the more important topics which you are covering with respect for with respect of UNODC responsibility. But apart from that, I've seen you are working closely with many prime ministers across Africa, and I've seen photographs as well, right, in United States and big diplomats and all, right? So do you see that there is a challenge? For example, UNODC wanted to do something and there is any political pressure. Imagine that there are so many journalists getting killed across the world, right? So best example is Thailand, India, Pakistan, because the journalists are writing a truth what government wanted to do, and government they're exposing a government failure. So how UNODC preventing this kind of crime, because this is again human right violation. You cannot kill a journalist to save your image, save your reputation, because you are not performing well on the ground, right? So just wanted to understand from a layman perspective how UNODC supporting and preventing this kind of crime to create a more pressure on leaders like Prime Minister or President of XYZ country.
Okay, there are three kinds of answers to that. Let me first base the first part of the answer in our mandate. UNODC is one of these kind of UN Secretariat offices that we act on the ground like an agency. We are very operational, but we are very much convention driven. Okay, when we talk about crimes, because basically when you threaten a journalist, it's because the journalist is reporting on something that the transnational organized crime network or the drug trafficking network doesn't want the journalist to basically to uncover, right? So if we talk about these kind of crimes, the UN Office on Drugs and Crime is based on the conventions. We have 3 conventions on drugs, the 1961, 71, and 88. We are also the guardian of the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime and the 3 protocols. So let's say that a journalist is, reporting. When I was in Panama, some journalists were reporting on in Panama and in Costa Rica on human trafficking for the purpose of organ removal. Okay, that is a very silent crime, which I even consider going towards a crime against humanity. So that crime is based on our conventions, on the conventions that the UN Office on Drugs and Crime is trying to protect. The rights of the people, the rights of the citizens, the rights of the state. We are trying to protect that, but we are the secretariat to these conventions, so member states are in charge of the implementation of the conventions. We can also talk about, for example, the 19 universal instruments against terrorism. When I was in East Africa, sometimes in some reports, Mauritius was seen as, back in the days before UNODC supported them, as not being fully compliant with the 1999 Convention Against the Financing of Terrorism. And then UNODC supported the legal process to align the legislation. But we can also be talking about, prison reform, whether the rights of the prisoners are being supported, minorities, etc. So we have a number of conventions that are guiding the work of UNODC. Our intervention comes when, journalists are reporting on that. How do we support that? Number one, we support networks of journalists to become specialized on the conventions we cover. We train them, and we've done so from Mexico to Latin America, Central America, Caribbean. We've done it also in Eastern Africa. We are going to be doing it here again. We support them to basically inform, but not to provide all the information, because many times this information is sub judice, is being investigated by the court. And we also have to respect the court system. If as a journalist, without knowing, unknowingly, the journalist reports on some data that is being basically investigated and is under criminal investigation, is going to go before the court, that would basically be counterproductive. So we support also the process before. We support once the process has been done. For example, a very good piece of investigation. For example, probably guys, you have seen the Netflix series on the business of drugs. Please watch it. It's 6 episodes, and UNODC is in 3 of the 6 episodes. If you see episode number 3 is on heroin. All right. So what we did is we supported Amaryllis Fox, the main producer, the journalist who is driving the whole analysis. When she traveled to different places, especially, for example, to Eastern Africa, we supported her with our technical information. But she is one of these journalists who could be under threat as well. So we supported her also in guiding her towards the best sources of information, etc. And we also support bringing the member state to also do their own analysis, which many times coincides with ours. Now, most of the crimes right now, be it, we also cover wildlife crime, right? So you have seen probably a number of journalists who have been killed in different parts of the world because they were reporting on wildlife crime. So that's something we support, the fight against wildlife crime. Of course, led by member states. So sometimes there are 3 processes. Before, guiding the journalists to do the right thing, not to expose themselves, providing the wrong information at the wrong time. Number 2, supporting also bringing member states who are the ones who are in the driving seat to also inform, report, with transparency on what is happening, and number three, also supporting the sources of information which sometimes are under threat. So what I'm saying is, transnational organized crime is global, right? You could be a journalist reporting on wildlife crime in West Africa and be threatened by a network of transnational organized crime from coming from a different jurisdiction. In this case, we also support journalists to put them before the right investigators, so they can be protected. And you will tell me, how do we make sure that the right investigators are the right investigators? Well, something that also UNODC does is we support member states in the establishment of what we call interagency units. Interagency units in ports, in airports with our container control program, in ports with our aircop program, but also land. We support member states to create cross-border interagency investigative and law enforcement units that are working across the borders, for example, between Senegal and the Gambia. So when there are crimes, for example, somebody, a journalist says, look, I have, identified a drug trafficking network going between the two countries. We protect them by also sharing the information that they provide with these interagency units, which are completely transparent, and they go through polygraph tests every 6 to 7 months. They are equipped with the best detective devices. They can also equip and they can do, for example, controlled deliveries. They can use all the instruments of the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime and the 3 protocols, because they've been trained and equipped for that. And if they haven't, we are going to be doing it if the member states request us to do so. So we place the journalists, we guide the journalists so that this information can be used for a specific investigation, instead of the journalist exposing her or himself in publishing the whole piece as it is. So these are some of the examples. Clearly, human rights. It's even though we have the a specific agency covering all the human rights conventions, principles, and standards. Human rights is something that is across the board in every single one of our conventions, and the way we also train member states in the implementation of the different instruments. So human rights is something that should be embedded in every single activity that UN agencies implement with member states.
Absolutely, and it's valuable insight, Amado. I think the most of the countries, right? The leaders, the political leaders, are trying to control people, right? So if they feel that there is a threat, they try to put some restriction, right? Let's say that application getting banned in North America, they cannot. I'm talking about North Korea, not America, right? North Korea. If you look at, there are democracies completely vanished, right? So journalists cannot report what is happening in the ground. Similarly, in China as well, if you look at the democracy, if you look at human rights, and and continuous violations going on, right? So I think this can be improved in future, but the situation is right now, it's very difficult, right? With respect to human rights violation and also the crime as well. But what are the upcoming projects from a UNODC perspective? What do you think? What is your focus area, let's say, in upcoming 5 years to prevent this kind of crimes, and how you wanted to enhance in Africa and then possibly in remaining countries, whereas you can work with big leaders as well?
Okay, first clarification. Now on what you just mentioned, again, we have a set of the UN is very big. I understand, but colleagues, every single agency has a mandate. Okay, the mandate of the UNODC is not to basically identify human rights violations. If we are talking about war crimes, there are, for example, we have the International Criminal Court in The Hague, based on the Rome Statute. We have the International Criminal Court for former Yugoslavia, also based in The Hague, on war crimes, crimes against humanity. And then we have the human rights standards, and of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights is the right body to identify and report on human rights violations per se. UNODC doesn't do that. UNODC focuses on the implementation of the conventions. So I wanted to make that clarification, because in no way I have a mandate to, mention, whether a specific member states is violating the rights. That's not what we do. And I would be getting into the mandate of another sister UN agency, and I don't want to do that. Now, once having clarified that, Roshan, everything is global now, okay? And the power that the social media, not only WhatsApp, but Twitter and all the social media instruments, Netflix, the power of social media is amazing right now. Everything is global. So first thing we do, we are in a very important year, which is a year where from the 2nd to the 4th, 5th of June, the UN General Assembly has decided to host a special session against corruption. Now, many of these crimes come through weak institutional practices, institutional architecture to fight against corruption. And UNODC is also the guardian of the UN Convention Against Corruption. And we are very happy because Africa is probably going to be the only continent, the first continent this year to have universal ratification of the convention. So if Somalia and if Eritrea accede to the UN Convention Against Corruption, and most probably Somalia will, and we hope, we pray that Eritrea will also do, this continent will become a champion in the implementation of the UN Convention Against Corruption and in the political will to fight corruption. So the first thing we do, we raise awareness with social media, with journalists, on why it's so important to fight corruption. Little corruption, corruption in society, in the private sector, corruption in not having the proper transparency clauses, in not having a transparent procurement process when you are trying to bring the COVAX or the COVID-19 vaccines to your country, etc. We do that. And how do we do that? We help member states, but also we bring the journalists to report on best practices. And I give you an example. Kenya 2 years ago decided to launch what we call the Blue Company Project. This is a project led by 500 companies that are linked with UNODC, meaning are supported by UNODC. UNODC is supporting them in the implementation of the UN Convention Against Corruption. And you would ask me concretely, Amado, what do you mean? I mean, we support them to identify an oversight person in each company, a compliance officer who ensures that the instruments of the convention are respected. For example, a malpractice. For example, corrupt practice in procurement, embezzlement of public officials. All the different aspects of the convention are included in the convention, and there are instruments to actually fight corruption and strengthen transparency in public procurement and in practices of the private sector. So we have that, and that has been supported by the President Kenyatta. And that means that Kenya is in the pathway not only to implement the UN Convention Against Corruption in the most efficient way, but in serving as a champion of the fight against corruption in the public and the private sector. Kenya has strengthened its judiciary in the last 3.5 years, its investigations to fight grand corruption. Now, we support the journalists to also provide them with the right platform, the right guidance to report on the good part. Because by reporting also on best practices, you are dismantling bad practices. You are guiding also civil society so that civil society understands that bad practices have consequences, but good practices, best practices have also consequences, which means you will be considered by UN as a champion. And civil society and of course the journalists play a big role. In some cases, and I mentioned in this region, journalists have been threatened by drug trafficking networks and transnational organized crime. And at UNODC, along with the government, with the prosecution, we have helped these journalists to leave the country temporarily so that they are not threatened directly and their lives are not in peril. so they can keep on reporting from a different sister jurisdiction. So there are many ways when we can actually protect journalists. Now, as I mentioned, everything is global. So a journalist can perfectly be receiving the right information, can be guided so that all the piece is right. For example, in a piece, what I would never suggest, and this has happened to me in this region, is when a journalist comes and says, give me names and last names of drug trafficking networks. I mean, number one, names and last names, UNODC, even if we have them, we cannot share. Number two, names and last names are, you have to go to the prosecutor, and he or she would never tell you, because these names and last names are part of a case file that is under investigation and is going to go before the court. So that's not the right way to go. What we say is, look, this is the modus operandi. Why don't you basically try to see the gaps, institutional gaps, legal gaps, etc., so we can start with them. And then the modus operandi, so whether we, this transnational organized crime network is a regional, sub-regional, or is also linked to other regions. Is this network linked to, the financing of terrorism? If so, what is the evidence, for example, from a communications journalistic point of view? So we guide them in doing the right analysis and the right investigation, and keeping the sources, of course, protected, and information that cannot be shared, leaving that information, of course, to the relevant prosecutor. So again, it's beautiful when somebody also sees somebody like civil society, a government official, that a really good piece is being published, and this piece is being published in conjunction with a grand investigation that has already advanced. The investigation has its own results, supported, for example, by UNODC, but the journalist also does its share by bringing civil society as part of the support of this initiative, whether it's fight against corruption, money laundering, transnational organized crime, or terrorism.
That's good to know, Amado, and I think you have covered all the possible initiatives which you guys are doing it, and really, feeling motivated what you guys are doing, and possibly being a part of journalism industry, we can Transformative Times also can support your mission and support what we can do best to support society to bring a best side of it. Before ending the session, I just wanted to understand, what is your advice if somebody wanted to join a UNODC or UN department to serve a country, serve an XYZ country, and bring the human values and also the more transparency? What is your advice and how the person can start to getting into that platform?
Thank you. So first of all, UNODC is a very, I would say, it's a very global forum. So I think 5 kinds of advices. One of them, substantive. UNODC is based on the convention. So if your background is criminal law, you are an economy specialist on financial crimes, you are a psychologist, you are a public health specialist, you are a law enforcement officer from a member state, or a prosecutor or a judge, this is your agency. If you are not, we need to see the angle. So first, take a look at your background, whether it fits with the vacancy that you will see posted. Number 2, languages. Depending on the region, this region covers French, but also English, Portuguese. We have Cabo Verde, we have Sao Tome, and Principe, we have Guinea-Bissau, but it also covers Spanish. We have Equatorial Guinea, and it covers Arabic. We have Mauritania, which is bilingual. So take a look at your language skills. If you want to work in West and Central Africa, French is important. Unless you work in administration, in which case English is more important, I would say humbly that French. So language skills. Do I have the right language skills? How do I draft? How are my drafting skills, my presentation skills? Number 3, if you're an African, please do not apply as a European. Even if you are married to a European, that will probably disqualify you. Why? Because we are very, very focused under the leadership of the Secretary General and/or Executive Director, Madam Gadawali, on geographic diversity. So if you're an African national, say you are married to a European, please apply with your nationality of origin. That will give you stronger chances of getting into the right path to be, to get the invited to the written and then to the oral. Number 4, think about your career path. If you want humanitarian affairs, probably UNODC is not the right agency to come to. If you want supply chains, probably you will have to think about some other UN agency, for example, in Rome, the World Food Program, etc. You need to think about your career path. Even if I were to start in UNODC, where would I see myself in 5 years from now, 7 years from now? If you see yourself in any of the pillars of UNODC, fighting drugs, drug trafficking, or supporting drug users, in being reintegrated, of course, treated, reintegrated into society. If you see yourself in, supporting any of the initiatives to fight transnational organized crime, strengthen borders with member states, support the fight against terrorism through the implementation of the UN Convention Against Terrorism, or supporting the fight against money laundering. If you see yourself there, this is probably your agency. And number 5, we are in the UN reform, so you need to understand that every skill that you bring in the job will have to be enhanced and transformed in the first 2 years. UNODC is an agency, it's very dynamic, and all the skills that we have, we transform them, and we are in constant evolution, constant transformation, constant training. Training and learning is one of the key goals of our team. Just to give you an example, we are about 155 people across the region. We are covering 22 countries, but we are based in all these countries, in 40 countries already. So, decentralization and rotation is also very important. So if you say that you start in Dakar, our idea is that in 2-3 years, you will be moving on to a different duty station in the region, reporting to the regional office in West Africa. So this is not a place to come and get comfortable. This is a place where you come, you wear a tie sometimes when you go and see a minister, or you are with a central authority, etc. But this is a place to be like I am right now. It's a place to get your hands dirty and work 14 hours a day. This is a place to work really with the people who are your clients, with member states, with civil society, with the victims of human trafficking, with smuggled migrants. So it's a very hands-on agency, and if you have that kind of person, UNODC is the place for you.
Indeed, valuable insight, Amado, and I think you have rightly mentioned, comfort zone will never give you something you want to achieve, right? So UN is not the place for people who wanted to be in a comfort zone. It's always for a person who is active, who is trying to do something different from a people what they are wanted to do in a comfort zone, right? So comfort zone is not available in the portfolio. That's really valuable discussion, and it is very informative knowledge which you have shared with us. Thank you for joining with us, and we're looking forward to invite you again in upcoming months. Keep doing your good work, what exactly you are doing it, and we wish you all the best for Africa, what you are doing it, and looking forward to meet you again soon in Spain.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a great Sunday.